And welcome to an FTF News live interview. Today we are speaking with Andrew Kaiyira. Andrew is the founder and managing partner of Eden Point Partners, which is a capital markets advisory firm. Eden Point Partners services institutions that participate in the over-the-counter derivatives markets. The company provides a variety of solutions, including product development and advisory services, business development, relationship management. Eden Point also facilitates industry partnerships and project management consulting services. Before Eden Point, Andrew was the director of commercial product development at the International Swaps and Derivatives Association, mostly known as ISDA. So, Andrew, before we dive into the questions, could you just tell us a little bit about yourselves and a little bit about Eden Point Partners?
Sure. Thank you very much, Eugene, and thanks for the opportunity to talk with you and FTF News. I'm also excited to moderate the upcoming November 10th FTF FIS webinar, focusing on moving firms to an enterprise-wide collateral data management strategy. So as you said, I'm the founder of Eden Point Partners, a firm launched recently with my co-founder, Charles Schneider. We provide product and business development advisory services to clients in the OTC space, in addition to facilitating innovation through collaboration across the industry. Most recently, we've been focused heavily on legal tech, reg tech, data optimization, and also just the trade lifecycle management process and how to really improve that with innovation.
Okay. In your opinion, what innovations are improving pre-trade and post-trade operations and processes?
Well,
trading firms.
Yeah, so the industry that we're in is constantly evolving, and that's due to regulatory change, market-driven dynamics. Traditionally, OTC is used as hedging vehicles, so it's important that firms stay up to date, not only with regulation, but market dynamics to effectively manage risk. So innovation is taking place on the pre-trade side, post-trade side. On the pre-trade side, you're starting to see that data is king. We've seen shops like Tradition open up Tradition Data. Looking forward to providing clients price transparency, best execution, using greater analytics and augmenting some of the toolkits from a data perspective that exists today. Another good example of that is actually Solve Advisors. They're doing something unique that I hadn't seen before, but getting to know them a little bit, doing NLP and machine learning to actually extract bids and offers and to provide better price transparency and other analytics to clients, really using just existing forms of information that's communicated without the clients having to do that. So it's that kind of innovation that I'm starting to see in the industry in terms of communication, analytics, just richer data sets and trying to get quality out of that information and provide it to clients so that they could get best execution or try to capitalize on opportunities for trading activity that's really exciting. Also, which is taking place in the pre-trade space is just a better ecosystem around onboarding. So onboarding is really a pain point for the dealers, but more so for their clients, especially large clients. They tend to go into a dealer, and when they're onboarding a new fund, they're somewhat treated as if they're a new client and they're starting from scratch. So what we're seeing out there in the marketplace is some of the onboarding providers that provide technical solutions, providing a central hub where clients could provide all their KYC, legal, tax information, all the prerequisites that are necessary to actually get an account onboarded and begin the trading process. And by doing so in a data-rich format that is a repeatable, transferable process, it not only kicks off the ability for traders to work with their clients and salespeople to work with their clients on new mandates, but it levels the playing field from a friction standpoint to get the post-trade activity set up. So that's something I'm excited about quite a bit.
Okay.
Seeing that space evolves.
All right. So in the OTC world, how are firms streamlining their collateral management operations to achieve phase 6 deadline compliance?
Yeah, so phase 6 is going to be quite a burden on not only the firms that were big participants in the prior phases, but it's the largest set of small entities that are now coming into scope. So I think first and foremost, it's the trade associations that have done well, like my close association with ISDA, and what they've done to prepare firms not only from webinars and conferences and things of that nature, but creating standards, because standards are good. So they've created standards in the documentation space. They created standards in terms of calculation of margin with SIM, CRIF files. And what that has done is opened up collateral providers and quite a few new entrants into the market to take the traditional data and processing elements that come with collateral management specific to IM and offer solutions. So for example, you could have IM threshold monitoring of your particular accounts to see if your accounts are going to be in scope. That's going to be a big lift to a lot of buy side. You could have firms calculate initial margin for you in terms of leveraging standard inputs. The streamlining of the margin call process, streamlining the ability for you to do reconciliations, and quite a host of things. So I think when it comes to how firms are being prepared, I think first is, do you think that you're going to be in scope? How do you monitor that? Are you using your own toolkit, or are you using service providers to do so? And then once you figure out that you are in scope, what's your disclosure process? Are you disclosing certain things such as, which entities of yours are in scope? Who are the custodians you're going to use for IM? Which method of calculation will you use? Are you using SIM or the grid methodology? Exchanging MTAs, thresholds, eligible collateral, haircuts. And then, in terms of documentation, of course, there's ISDA Create, which I've been very favorable to work on from its inception, which started out as an IM tool to be able to have the end-to-end process negotiation take place very transparently, easy, with data-rich aspects being created automatically for negotiators to then port that into these service providers or your internal system. So there's quite a bit out there that firms are doing, but the benefit for the smaller firms is that they could actually leverage the work that's been done previously and this multitude of service providers that are out there ready and willing to help.
And then just quickly, how will the smaller firms leverage that previous work?
So the plus is a lot of this information is out there online. So every service provider has taken great efforts to put the information of their services, not only on their websites, but they make the rounds on conferences. They're constantly, pounding the pavement to go out and speak to these smaller entities, the larger dealers to get them familiar and onboarded to their services, which many of them are. But also ISDA's done just an excellent job of being out there. Amy Caruso's team, Tara Cruz out there, sounding the bell of not only what the rules mean, because that's the difficulty. Am I in scope? What do these rules mean? If I'm a global institution, how am I impacted in various jurisdictions? And then they put out an info hub page where I say every firm should go to, where there's steps outlined from, operational, legal onboarding, really the gamut of how to do this. So there's not an excuse for a firm who may have not been familiar with this, that they don't have the toolkit to do this. It's really there for them, and it's good that previous adherence to this regulatory change have done so by putting their lessons learned out there for firms.
And we touched a little bit on data. So what do you think about the idea of an optimized framework for collateral data governance? How does ISDA's common data model CDM, how does that fit into that concept?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I mean, SIM inherently was designed for this, right? An open model that is built for a more optimal data governance ecosystem. The model represents standard terms, operational workflows in a common digital format. And some of the benefits are for specific to collateral management would be improved onboarding, fewer reconciliations, decreased settlement risks, secure transfer of information, mitigation of margin disputes, provide standards for collateral eligibility data, and so much more. So, leveraging the common domain model, which ISDA's, recently incorporated off the back of ISDA Create, is very key because you do your legal negotiation on an electronic platform, the data is captured, you are able to export that in a common format that is common to any service provider. Very easy to use the API. They pull it in. The model tells you exactly, what you need to do in terms of, collateral processing and settlements, et cetera. And it really is groundbreaking if firms leverage those industry standards such as CDM to move the industry forward, especially at a time where you're dealing with very heavy volumes, new entrants to the market. They're not familiar with how all of this works. This kind of innovation and standard practice around the industry where folks could coalesce around how to operate from a data standpoint is really where we think the industry is going to go.
Mm-hmm. So getting back a little bit to phase 6 and compliance, there has been a big push to digitize relationship level documents. So how has that push influenced UMR reforms and so forth? Has it served as some kind of a catalyst for it?
Well, I think it's the inverse, right? I think potentially we were always on a track to digitization of documentation. Historically in OTC markets, we started out prior to regulation with taking confirmations and taking 10-page, 20-page confirmations on the transaction level, is to standardize those down to smaller form, easier templates that could be digitized. And then we saw that through DTCC and MarketServe and other participants, coming on to a digital form from a transaction level. So now what's occurring is it's taking place on the relationship level. So for IM specifically, and I mentioned ISDA Create prior, those documents were actually drafted so that they can be easily configurable in a digital format. So now you're able to just select a yes or no, or applicable or not applicable on many of the elections. It saves a lot of time and allows for developers to actually put that through a digital platform. So I think that's going to continue. Obviously, the master agreements on there, rate reform documents, VMs coming for in particular ISDA Create, but you're seeing digitization, across the board. And during the pandemic, what you've seen is not only in OTC markets, but firms are saying it's a work from home environment. I can't go to a paper drawer anymore and pull out, documents for us to review, or even worse, post a particular crisis that may happen. How do you coalesce and quickly identify where your legal risk is for making sure that your arrangements with your counterparties are correct? Having that in a digitized form as operationalized information for risk, for trading in terms of transparency for the C-suite, it's just the wave of the future. I think the difficulty is getting firms to do something new, which is always a little bit difficult.
And this the digital versions of everything, it feels like that is going to continue, and that it's actually, if anything, going to become even more evolved than what it is now.
I think so. I think where the toolkit is out there. There's NLP. There's quite a bit of innovation taking place in terms of extracting the contents of what's within these documents, and then again to fixate on the trade associations and their particular role. ISDA is putting out the ability for these kind of provisions to be accessed and agreed much easier through a clause library, right? That clause library project is something which I think is going to be repeatable through other markets as well, because really they're saying, firms negotiate and have terms that are pretty much similar across the board, but kind of standards to say, check this box, so to speak, and you're meaning this particular clause, and everyone across the street knows exactly what you're doing. That again is a catalyst for further innovation and digitization, and being able to leverage that data for exactly what you need it for.
You had mentioned artificial intelligence before, but what are your thoughts about AI and how it's impacting securities operations and compliance and burdensome?
Yeah, I think AI can play a real significant role in automating ops and compliance. We're already starting to see that happen. But I always say when this question is asked that the precursor to this is clean data. So first and foremost, it's leveraging standard data formats and industry recognized process standards, then overlaying those with the power of that AI can provide and other solutions. Because, for example, firms currently create their own data sets to describe operational processing. And sometimes even in the same organization, there's these data silos. So if a common data standard is accepted and adopted, and every system is pretty much speaking the same language, then AI, smart contracts, and other innovations could come about, because you kind of fall victim to the garbage in, garbage out paradigm. So you could have all the tools that are relevant to you from an AI perspective, but if your data sets are just inoperable, so to speak, and you can't rely on them, how could you really get a smart contract? How could you get to that point, right? No one's going to be comfortable to say, put my risk, put my P&L on a conveyor belt when 9 out of 10 times the information's wrong, and it's not the technology, it's the data. So I think the foundation of bedrock is standards that everyone could agree to, then data models like CDM that everyone could agree to. You implement them, and then you overlay this technology to produce a host of analytics and other things that we might not even foresee right now that could really transform the industry.
And I think you touched on some of the data access barriers that are complicating the management of over-the-counter products, processes, and regulatory requirements. So how are people going to get around and tear down those data barriers?
I think it's the silos, right? I'd say first and foremost, it's the silos. Every department, division, every team in some institutions, definitely service providers, have their own kind of data silos. So it goes back to kind of the tenet that I was mentioning before, which is standards, right? Start with the standards, industry standards. The industry is starting to lead the way on that. Adopt these standards. And then really next would be ask yourself the question, and is the perceived cost of converting old systems to new data sets and new ways of management that heavy of lift? If you do it from a silo perspective, every person working on their particular budget is going to covet their budget not to uptick. So they'll say, yes, it's too much of a burden, we can't do this now. Too much on our infrastructure, we can't do it now. But if you have COOs and C-suite level individuals taking a look at this and saying, wait a minute, how much am I losing out on the drip down effect, post-trade, even pre-trade, right? Because we're operating in this manner, then they get a holistic view that we could actually provide better client service. We could risk manage better, be prepared to produce what we need from a regulatory standpoint in a more efficient and transparent way. And that to me is kind of where you you start to see the needle move on tearing down that barrier. What also I see is that the reality is you can't do what I've just said overnight. So interesting firms like Kinetics Trading Solutions, I like their approach, right? They say, take what you need now. Yes, we could move you to AI and better data sets and operational efficiency, but we know you're not going to do it overnight. So we could use our toolkit, which is multitask and kind of oriented for that particular task, to start small, nibble a bit, and then move forward. So sometimes I think that approach, or a hybrid of the two, CEOs recognizing that they have a larger problem and much to gain if they move forward, and then having providers like that who could come in and say, start where you'd like, but making sure that the operational line managers and those who are senior to them are supportive of that strategic approach. That's kind of where you'll get where you need to be.
So in some ways, is the discussion around data a non-starter if people have lots of silos?
I don't think it's a non-starter. I think you need to start with the question of, is this what your clients want? And I think, if in today's markets, right, we're becoming extremely automated. People have optionality, and quite frankly, we're used to technology in our day-to-day lives away from work, right, away from the financial sector. So clients come in and just use an example, they want the big technology option. You go onto Netflix, it knows exactly who you are, it knows what you reviewed before, it knows the jurisdiction that you're in, when you're using their applications. You don't have to tell them that, right? So why can't we do that in financial markets, right? With data, we have just a wealth of data. We know our processes, we know our clients, so we should be treating our clients that way, right? So basically, break down the silos, because that's what they want. If they're talking to someone in rates, and then they go to speak to someone on the equity side or prime services side, they don't want to act as if they're talking to a different firm, right? And have a different system and have a different process. If altogether you're providing client service, you need to look at it from a client service perspective first. And so when you're looking at your data silos, I think you need to ask the question, am I providing good client service first and foremost? And what do my clients want? They want a portfolio level solution. That's why when the word optimization is put forth and interoperability, they sound like buzzwords, but they started it as a baseline of what is the purest form of the operating model that we all want to get to. So to do so, you need to break down data silos. As I mentioned before, data is the key to everything. It kicks off the operational process all throughout the life cycle.
But just a final point, at these firms, the data silos are a legacy issue in a way, because of the way business was done before. So there's a internal political aspect of this as well. Setting aside all the technology that's there that could fix things.
I agree with you, Eugene. I think that's exactly it. It's we built this system. It's our legacy system. We built on top of it. Whenever there was a regulatory change, we did a minor adjustment to it, right? Whenever there's a market change, we did a minor adjustment to it. What are you asking me to do? Are you asking me to rip this out? And that's a tough question. Maybe that is the answer, but maybe the answer is figure out where you want to be and what are the intermediate steps to still operate efficiently. But as you're doing so, you're getting wins every step of the way towards your ultimate goal of just operating in a more data efficient, more transparent. And another example that I would use is, every time there's a market change, if you have created your own, your own personal data sets to represent the same object, the same product, the same process, every time the industry makes a change, you need to gather the individuals who know that unique proprietary process, that unique proprietary representation of the product, and then make that change. Maybe they moved to another department, maybe they moved outside of your firm. And that's why the cost of change always ticks up. So you need to have the ability to operate in a more fluid manner. And data begins with, what are we benefiting? Are we gaining anything for having proprietary in-house models and technology, right? That operates on the top of that. The question might be no. And most of the time I would suspect, if it's operations, it is no. It's moving towards client service, and what do your clients want?
Lastly, what technology innovations really excite you?
As I mentioned before, I'm really watching solutions who are offering cross portfolio services. And what do I mean by that? I mean really services that are saying this is how the client operates across the full suite of their business. So therefore, when we look to service them, we're looking at collateral, but we're also identifying how collateral interacts with legal documentation, how trading in terms of affirmation and confirmation operates with upstream onboarding systems, how settlement kind of interact with how the trades were booked. We're not just looking at our settlement system separately. We're looking to say you booked this transaction, collateral movements, settlements, all of this is in an ecosystem. So I think those institutions that and service providers that are looking to say we could give you an optimized portfolio level view because you're one client that wants multiple things, you're trading in and out of multiple products 24/7 in different jurisdictions that are regulated differently, but we understand that. We really understand that. And when we're offering our services, that's how we're doing it. And those innovations, I think, from regulatory change and digitization and messaging and smart contracts and things of that nature that are starting to evolve, really, again, I would tie it back to data, and I'd say I'm very hopeful. I really do think that we've advanced really far. OTC markets in particular have always been innovative, and in the last few years, especially since the pandemic, we've just seen this resilient nature of how we operate, and providers are recognizing that this is an opportunity for them to provide better services, and the industry is really adopting some of these services at a much faster rate than they have in the past. And also what I would also say is what we're fixated on at Eden Point is the collaborative aspect of all this. Previously, firms, especially service providers, used to worry that they'd lose market share if they hitched their solution onto what they may perceive as competitors. You're not seeing that as much anymore. They're actually saying, I do this bit a little bit better, you do that bit a little bit better. If we combine our efforts, we could actually provide better client service to the entire industry. And collectively, they're gaining market share and being adopted, and everyone's implementing their solutions because they know a client doesn't have to pick and choose and take a suboptimal component of what you're providing and then lose out on what another provider may be doing a bit better. If you combine your efforts, then you can provide better client service. And at the end of the day, that's what we want at Eden Point, and we love partnering with the industry to do so.
Just quickly, the name of your company, Eden Point. Why did you pick that name?
Well, my mother raised us, focused very heavily on the creation story. So Eden plays quite a bit of a big role. My niece is also named Eden, the brother that I follow in my family of 6. And, it just resonates well. It's a fresh start. It's something new. It's the point of non-complacency. We don't just talk about innovation. We get to the point. So it's Eden Point.
Okay. All right, great. Thank you.
Appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
Appreciate the time with you, Eugene, and FTF News. Look forward to moderating the panel on collateral management and having more of an enterprise solution to this approach.